In this video, we're going to be looking at UFC Vegas 100. We're going to talk DraftKings, lineup construction, strategy, what you need to do to be successful on this card because it's a tricky one. As always, you can call me Kunith. Let's make some money this week. For those of you that don't know, Ricky Simón and Bernardo Sopai are off of the card this week. Why? I don't know. That's not important. What's important is they're not on the card, and now we're down to 11 fights. It really doesn't leave us a whole lot to work with when we're building lineups this week, so we're not going to go too in-depth with strategy because it's kind of a crapshoot with 11 fights, especially with how chalky some of these favorites look. But if you haven't already, go back and watch the predictions video from earlier in the week. That'll be linked in the description and in a pinned comment. That acts as a full card breakdown where we look at each one of these fights. This is more geared toward DraftKings. Again, lineup construction, salary, all that good stuff. So let me just get right into the value plays. These are plays at 8,000 and below. There ain't many. The first guy that jumps off the page right at 8,000 is the best play on the slate in Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos. He's 8,000 salary and he's fighting Zach Scroggin, who's making his UFC debut on very short notice. He's a lock button in your lineups this week, and you might think, I don't know about that Kunith. He's going to come in at high ownership. His last win, he scored 49 points. I understand your concern, but the reality is he's a minus 800 favorite, priced as an underdog on DraftKings, so you need to play him. And it's going to make more sense to play him as we go through because you'll realize that there really aren't that many value plays, so the likelihood of you getting 6 winners and not having Dos Santos in your lineup this week is very low. So I'm not too concerned with the score that he's going to post because I expect him to win. That's at least 30 points in a decision win. I think that he's going to look for takedowns here. I think he's going to cleanly outstrike Scroggin. I looked at the tail of the tape and I thought, okay, Scroggin's going to beat him. Bigger, younger, undefeated, not only as a pro, but as an amateur as well. But as you sink your teeth into the film, you realize he's not fighting anybody. And it's not his fault. He's winning the fights the way that he should be winning them against the level of competition he's been faced with. But this is such a big step up in competition. He's not going to be able to get takedowns. He looks very clunky and uncomfortable on the feet. But I don't know if he's going to be able to control a guy who's done it at this level for this long in Zaleski dos Santos. I think Zaleski dos Santos, if he is taken down, just going to pop back up to his feet. And I think that Scroggin is going to gas out late and probably get finished in the 3rd round. So if he does get finished in the 3rd round, you're looking at 45 points at a minimum. I think you're going to get a knockdown mixed into that. I think Zaleski dos Santos is just fine this week. And at 8,000, again, probably somebody you need in the lineup. The next value play for me is going to be Matt Semelsberger at 7,700. He's one of only 2 underdogs that I think are going to win on this card, and as we go through, I'll explain who that is. But I think he has all the tools to get it done this week. He's significantly bigger than Radtke. He's longer, he's younger, he's got better experience, crazy power in both hands. I think he can get this fight to the mat if he wants it down there, and I think he's probably put an emphasis on takedown defense after the performance against Jeremiah Wells, Preston Parsons. I think there's a good chance that we see the best version of Matt Semelsberger this week, and he's really going to have to bring it because he's 1-4 in his last 5. There are guys that could probably put out better performances, more entertaining performances for less money. So if he doesn't go out there and absolutely put on a show and get like a 1st or 2nd round knockout in spectacular fashion, he probably gets his walking papers, and I think him and his team know that coming into it. So you know it's time for Matthew Semelsberger. I think he gets back on track. I think he wins this week, and if he wins by knockout, we've seen him post really high scores in the past. The final value play here is going to be my boy GM3. Gerald Meerschaer's got it done for us before, most recently against Edmund Shabazian. He's getting beat up until he's not. And we've seen him do that against guys time and time again where things don't look like they're going his way until they are. And against this guy in Reiner de Ridder, who's had a lot of success outside the promotion, when you start to look at some of the fights that de Ridder has had, these guys don't have the same kind of submission defense that Gerald Meerschaer has. They don't appear to have the same kind of will to win that Gerald Meerschaer has because Meerschaer, there's no shortage of heart. Like, he might look slow and tired and like he doesn't want to be there, but then he comes back to win late. And de Ridder's not a guy who has big like one-shot knockout power, and I don't think he's somebody who's going to be able to put together that strong of a 3rd round. Last time he lost, he didn't even get up. The man gassed so hard in a championship fight that 1 minute into the 3rd round, he just decided not to get up. So he quit on himself in a championship fight, and against Gerald Meerschaer, who he's going to give him everything he's got early. And come the 3rd round, I don't think he's going to be there. And take it from a guy who regularly gasses out during rolling feeling at the end of jiu-jitsu, like when you don't want to be there anymore, it's like, all right, dude, just take the arm triangle, I'm done. So don't be surprised if you see a Gerald Meerschaer come from behind victory this week. I think you could submit this guy late in the third. Those are all the value plays. We are starved for value this week, and we're also starved from value from a betting perspective as well. Like, let me pull this back up. If we just go down the list, let me clear this out real quick. We go down the list. Carlos Prates is like a -800 favorite. For you to get his knockout line, it's -400. Little to no juice there. Denis Gomes -500 plus, no juice there. -400 on Abdul-Malik, who's making his UFC debut. Gillian Robertson, a big favorite if you want to take her like ITD. That makes sense. She's one of the most decorated finishers in the female divisions. Then you're going to get some value there. There's some juice. But then we go down here to De Ridder, massive favorite. Blackshear is a pretty big favorite. Melissa Mullins is a huge favorite over a debutante. We've got Romious. He's a big favorite as well, and the line just keeps getting wider and wider, especially in the Tresean Gore fight. You could say the same thing. The line just keeps getting wider and wider. By fight time, he'll be -200 or worse. And I'm not so sure that Tresean Gore should be -200 or worse over anybody in the UFC. We're going to see just how bad is Antonio Trocoli this week. Charles Radtke is the only favorite with a reasonable line, and I think he's got the toughest matchup. We come down here, Eliza Zaleski dos Santos, -850 at 37 years of age. So it's pretty crazy when you start looking through here. There's not a whole lot of value. So if there was ever a week that you wanted to skip this, I mean, you don't have to play them all. We still have our bets out, like on KunithMMA.com. We're still going to hit the community parlay as best as we can, but you don't have to play every single slate. The UFC does a really good job of keeping us busy throughout the year. There are plenty of opportunities because, I mean, at this point with 11 fights and no juice to speak of, this is not all that interesting. And I'll walk that back a little bit. It is interesting. The UFC fights are always going to be interesting. You can always put your hard-earned down, get some action down, get a sweat down, but like, is it as interesting as Pirates of the Caribbean? I don't think so. You look me in my face and tell me it's more interesting than the greatest frenemy story of all time with Captain Jack Sparrow and Captain Hector Barbosa? No chance. Captain Jack Sparrow, widely regarded as the greatest pirate of all time, but Hector Barbosa reaching higher heights in the pirating world. And you couldn't have one without the other. They hated each other. They tried to kill each other multiple times, but they always helped each other. You even notice how Captain Jack Sparrow is calling him Hector because he knows, like, that was my boy before everything happened with the Black Pearl. So is it as interesting as Pirates of the Caribbean? No, but many things aren't. But with that, we can go into building some lineups this week. We're going to build cash game lineups first. How are we going to attack the cash game lineups, Kunith? We can't stack the main event. I know. I'm here to help you. Listen, since we're not stacking the main event, what you're going to have to do here is you're going to have to get a punt play. Somebody who you hope does not get finished early, somebody who's probably pretty inexpensive, somebody who might get a takedown or two in this fight. It's Zach Scroggin. He's fighting a guy who hasn't finished a fight in over 5 years. He's also probably got the wrestling advantage, and he needs to lean on that wrestling if he has any chance this week. So it's a fight that I assume goes the distance, or at least into the third round. I think he's going to get a takedown or two. He's going to throw some strikes, and at 6,700, even if he scores you, say, 25 points in a loss, on a card like this, you probably need him. And to go a step further, you probably need the other side for salary purposes. At 8,000, still underdog pricing, this is crazy. You don't get something like this. Normally, you don't have this much salary left over, which means now you can play any of these chalky favorites that you'd like. You could play Romious, you could play Mullins, you've got 8,900 left over, you can grab Blackshear, you can grab Tresean Gore if you wanted. Totally fine with that. And he probably finds himself on the DFS Strategy Guide this week. DFS Strategy Guide is always going to give you the cash game plays of the week, the tournament plays at each pricing tier, and the fight that you should target on the slate. We've been doing very well with that. Crushed the bets last week as well. You can get the official betting article. Community parlay, like we mentioned in the predictions video, hit at better than plus 5,300 odds last week, so you paid for your membership many times over. And if you want to build better lineups or build better slips for your pick'em contests, we do have the data model, projections, optimizers, things like that. I know a lot of you lean on the data model when you're playing Underdog Fantasy, Prize Picks, Pick 6, stuff like that. All of that can be found on KunithMMA.com, linked in the description and in a pinned comment. Back to the breakdown. So we're going to build some tournament lineups this week. Real quick, like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment if you haven't already. You know the drill. I'll just go through a couple of ideas for lineups this week, or rather, it might be more beneficial for me to talk about spots you might want to avoid, spots you might want to be overweight to. I think we'll do that instead because, again, there's not a whole lot of room to build lineups this week. So instead, I'll build like one or two real quick, but then we'll talk more about these fighters as we go through. So let's say you were here and you wanted to grab Blackshear. you wanted to grab Abdul-Malik. 79.50 left over per fighter. You're going to want to plug in Zaleski Dos Santos, obviously. I'll come down here to GM3 to open up some more salary. 83.50 left over. I probably end up playing Semelsberger. I've got all the value plays in there. And now I might grab somebody like Romious. You got grappling and submission upside, grappling and submission upside, grappling and finishing upside, whether that's a submission or a knockout via ground and pound. I think Blackshear is better everywhere. And then you have a giant favorite and one of the more live dogs on the card, in my opinion. We blow that up and want to try something new. Let's say you wanted to go with Gomes. Let's say you wanted to come here to Trayshawn Gore. Let's say you wanted to go grab your Dos Santos again. You're still probably going to end up playing one of these underdogs down here. I'll play somebody who wasn't on that list just to give you a different look. Let's say you wanted to go with Sygula. But even then, there's still not a whole lot of room. I guess you're going to have to end up going back to the list. That's what I'm saying. If you are thinking that that player pool that I created for the value plays is the right mix of people, there's not a whole lot you can do with your lineups this week. So I'm not going to deviate from that too much. It's kind of where we're at. And that is the purpose of this video. I feel like sometimes people watch the video and they think, oh, it says final picks, and I'm going to change the name. It's going to be different now. It says final picks, and you said these people are going to be good for your lineup and they lost. It's DFS, man. Not everybody is going to win. Most of the time when you're playing DFS, you're going to lose. 90% of people are going to lose when they put their money into DFS week in and week out. That's the game. You're competing against other people. Now, if you want a fair shot, you could just bet. But with DFS, sometimes you got to play people you don't like. Sometimes you got to build lineups that seem a bit gross. Sometimes you got to think, oh, this woman probably loses, but I got to plug her into my lineup. So just keep that in mind as you're clicking through. But we'll finish up by just talking about each one of these fighters and kind of what they bring to the table. I think that will be the way that you get the most value out of this, because I know it's not the best video in the world just because it's not the best slate in the world. So real quick, just from top down, Carlos Prates, if he goes out there and scores 112 DraftKings points like he did last time, maybe. I don't think he's a great play this week. If he wins in the first round and doesn't land that many strikes like against Charles Radtke, 106 and 9,600 with this pricing on this slate with the amount of chalk, no. You would need an uncharacteristic performance from Carlos Prates to make sense this week. He's going to come in higher owned, over owned than he should be. He probably doesn't break 115 DraftKings points. He's the most expensive fighter on the slate, and you can argue, well, he has 5 rounds to work. Neil Magny's tough. I don't know. I don't really see a situation where this fight is going beyond the 3rd round, and I don't think if he knocks Neil Magny down, then Neil Magny's going to get back up. I think if he hurts Neil Magny, the fight's over. So for the amount of points that he would need for me to think that he makes sense this week, I don't love it. So as far as your DraftKings plays go, I'm out on Carlos Prates. I think he's going to win. I think he wins by knockout, but DraftKings, I wouldn't put him in a single entry lineup. Denis Gomes would be interesting leverage off of Prates if you wanted to go play Gomes instead of Prates, because she's going to come in lower owned. She has that big power. We've seen her post those really high ceiling type of scores, and Karolina's there to be hit. I just worry that if Karolina comes into this trying to avoid that big power early, that she kind of limits the upside that Gomes brings to the table. I also don't think that there's multiple knockdown upside here. She hits hard, man. It's not like flash knockouts where people are getting knocked down and getting back up. Like when she hits them, they don't move. Shout out Jeremy Stevens. So I think if you're playing Denis Gomes, you're doing it really just to get leverage off of Prates. Abdul-Malik, I think, is really interesting this week. We've seen Dusko give up some high scores in the past, finished in 3 of 4 losses. I don't think too many people are going to be playing Abdul-Malik this week, so I think that's interesting. Gillian Robertson, one of the best plays on the slate, one of the most decorated finishers in the women's divisions. She actually holds the record for most finishes at flyweight, and she's already got 2 finishes and 3 wins at strawweight. She can really put it on Pinheiro, and if she does finish her late, probably racking up a lot of control time, a lot of takedowns. We've seen her nasty ground and pound that leads to submission. So that scoring ceiling is there. At 9,200, I think she has a higher scoring ceiling than Prates does. Reiner DeRitter's cool. I don't think this fight goes beyond 2.5 rounds. Blackshear, he's scored well when he wins, right? So you got 114 there, 115 there, and a better decision, he would have got 95 points there. Cody Stamann's a really hard guy to put away, though, so I'm a little bit worried about the upside there. Melissa Mullins might just go out there and smother this young woman. And you look at how she scored in the past, you might be off of it. You might say, oh, she's sandwiched right between the price in her debut and her most recent fight where she didn't deliver. But a lot of physicality, a lot of willingness to get into the clinch, a lot of takedowns attempted. I think she's pretty sneaky this week and has that upside. I think Romious has a ton of upside. His name sounds like the Latin word for a muscle that's in your back. I feel like you can hear it in your doctor's voice. Like imagine your doctor pressing on your back like, do you feel your Cortavious Romious right now. You know, I do feel a lot of Romious in my Cortavious right now. Huge grappling advantage for him in this fight, and he's super aggressive as well. So if he wins, it's probably inside the distance. It's probably pretty early as well while they're still dry and fresh. I like Romious this week a lot for DraftKings. Gore, I'm not in love with it at all. Radtke, I actually prefer the other side of the matchup. Zaleski, we've talked about. Semelsberger, we've talked about. And I mean, this is just the other side of all the matchups. So again, apologies if this wasn't the best video you've ever seen on the channel, but we don't really have much to work with this week. I'm way more excited for next week's card, obviously, and I'll see you then. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment something for the algorithm. You want some extra help? You want to make some more money, hopefully? Visit KunithMMA.com, linked in the description and in a pinned comment. I wish you the best of luck at UFC Vegas 100. Let's go.